Wyoming, Utah, and Arizona. Uranium ore contains 3 isotopes. By weight, 99.28%, which is uranium-238, 0.71%, which is uranium-235, and 0.0058%, which is uranium-234. Of these 3 isotopes, uranium-235 and uranium-234 are used for nuclear fuel and weapons. Uranium-238 becomes depleted uranium.
This is an aluminum model of one DU tank round. This round would be fired by an Abrams tank. If it was actually uranium rather than aluminum, it would be over 10 pounds of solid uranium. What happens, it moves extremely high velocity. The minute it leaves the bore of the gun, it catches fire. So this rod is a burning rod of uranium. It impacts tremendous forces, unbelievable forces, over this very small diameter. And it's like a blowtorch with tremendous forces that punches right through. Now, as this breaks through and goes into anything, can be steel, concrete, sandbag bunkers, wood, or anything, uranium itself is soft. So you have parts of the fragments of uranium breaks off as it enters and goes through. The uranium rod emits alpha, beta, and gamma radiation and X-ray radiation. The alpha particle is a 4.15 MeV particle. That's 4.15 million electron volts. Now, the intercellular voltage, the voltage that your cell operates biologically, is 10 electron volts. So when that cell is bombarded by an alpha particle at 4.5 million electron volts, it doesn't have a good day. We have all kinds of other problems. We have the beta particle and the gamma rays, the X-rays. Now, we've actually measured the ionizing radiation emissions from a DU rod within, say, 4 to 6 inches at over 300 millirems per hour. Now, that radiation is continuous. So you get a fragment of DU into your body that's emitting at over 300 millirems per hour. Or if you're holding the rod in your hand, it's over 300 millirems per hour. And if you got the fragment, then you got the alpha particle in there, which is an extremely hot particle, 4.15 MeV. And we're looking at what we measured over 10,000 counts per minute, 10,000 disintegrations per minute, 10,000 alpha particles per minute. In fact, in May of 2002, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs reported that over 160,000 troops that participated in Gulf War I, the period August of 1990 through the fall of 1991, basically October and November 1991, have been classified as disabled from anywhere from 10 to 100%. Now, my own disability didn't come about until after May of 2002. The count right now is somewhere close to 200,000. When we look at all the troops that have gone into the Persian Gulf region between August of 1990 and May of 2002, when the last formal report was written, the U.S. Department of Veteran Affairs formally acknowledges over 221,000 individuals are labeled as permanently disabled, and over 10,000 are deceased that had service connection disabilities. There's a big difference. There's a 60,000 increase in individuals that are disabled amongst those that served after the fall of 1991. That disability is only due to residual exposures and immunizations that were continued to be given, because there was no active combat. There was no active maneuvering. So what's happened? Well, what happened prior to Gulf War I is pre-deployment health physical assessments were not given. And at the completion of Gulf War I, post-deployment health physical assessments were not given, even though we specifically requested it. In my own case, when I came back to get released after completing special projects, I said I was exposed to these. We need to do these tests. And they refused to do them.
I've been a staff scientist at 2 nuclear weapons laboratories, 5 years at the Lawrence Berkeley Lab, where the Manhattan Project started, and 2 years at the Lawrence Livermore Lab.
Lorraine Murray is an independent scientist who specializes in radiation issues. Her degrees include BS in geology, master's degree in Near Eastern Studies, and has pursued doctoral studies in geosciences at the University of California, Davis.
For the past 5 years, my research is focused on the damaging effects of low-level radiation. The history of depleted uranium goes back to a 1943 declassified memo known as the Groves Memorandum. In this memo, depleted uranium is recommended for development as a poison gas warfare weapon. According to the United Nations Human Rights Commission, which has declared depleted uranium illegal, approximately 17 countries have purchased depleted uranium weaponry from the United States government.
In December of 1992, the director of the United States Army Environmental Policy Institute was ordered to figure out ways to reduce the toxicity of uranium munitions by Assistant Secretary of the Army Walker. In 1995, the director of AEPI told the Secretary of the Army, "We can't reduce the toxicity. It's not possible." The United States Army Common Task Training states very specifically uranium contamination will make food and water unusable. And yet we use it in combat all over the place. That's why the United Nations Subcommission on Human Rights had ruled that uranium munitions were an illegal weapon, because they're indiscriminate. They can't be cleaned up, and they last for eternity.
The amount of depleted uranium used in the first Gulf War in 1991 is approximately 340 tons, and this was admitted by the U.S. government. In Yugoslavia, Lord Robertson, who was the head of NATO in 1998, admitted in the public media that the United States had used depleted uranium warheads in every missile used in that invasion. It's estimated that at least 1,000 tons of depleted uranium was used in Afghanistan in 2001, and approximately 2,400 tons were used in Iraq in 2003.
The United Nations Subcommission on Human Rights, because of the fact that uranium contamination makes food and water unusable, has a permanent effect and can't be cleaned up, and affects not only combatants but non-combatants. It's been ruled an illegal weapon. It was years ago. That's common sense.
We all know that the United States falsely accused Iraq of possessing weapons of mass destruction in 2003. In fact, the United States invaded Iraq and used weapons of mass destruction against the Iraqis. Depleted uranium has a half-life of 4.5 billion years. If we had a pound of depleted uranium now, in 4.5 billion years, there would only be half a pound left. This means that the Middle East and Central Asia and Yugoslavia are contaminated forever.
We're 1st Platoon Charlie Company, and we were part of Operation Iraqi Freedom.
On the battlefield, you gotta have an officer who can think on his feet. We had that.
Lieutenant Walker came to us from ROTC.
It didn't matter if we were in training or in combat. He was right there with us.
He had confidence and dedication.
And wherever he goes, we go.
I'm a military brat. My father spent 24 years in the Army.
Staff Sergeant Bob Jones is a veteran of Desert Storm, a former Army Ranger now retired and disabled due to Gulf War illness. Not only is Bob ill, but his entire immediate family is affected as they all suffer from mycoplasma fermentans incognitus.
During the air campaign, we targeted their chemical, biological, and nuclear facilities. And so we were exposed to chemicals, biologicals, nuclear radiation in the form of depleted uranium, and also direct enriched uranium, or EU, from those nuclear facilities that were bombed and targeted. And many of the coalition, especially guys on the front line, such as my unit and others like us, were in the area of exposure from the fallouts of the coalition bombings. And although this information became widely known as early as 1994 through testimony and release of GAO reports that showed that the meteorological data supported the fact that the downwind plume or fallout from the bombings drifted over a large number of the troops that were forward positioned.
The U.S. military personnel during Gulf War I, just like during the Balkans and in Gulf War II now, were not adequately protected from all of the exposures they had. We know from first-hand experience that the M40 series mass, as confirmed by the United States General Accounting Office, is defective. We know that it leaks when you move your head. We know that none of those, either the M17 series or the M40 series, provides protection against toxic industrial chemicals. No. Were they adequately protected? Absolutely not. Was my team adequately protected? Absolutely not. We wore the respirators, and we got sick. Now, what happened? What we confirmed and what we saw during Gulf War I and when I did the research as director of the Depleted Uranium Project, that DU round comes down and it breaks up. We have the spalling, then we have the fire. And we create uranium oxides of different types. Some in the ball game the size of cigarette ash and marbles on down to 0.1 micron. This has always been known. When I talked to senior Manhattan Project scientists that were expert particle physicists, they said, hey, we knew uranium when it breaks up like this was going to be down in the 0.1, 0.2 micron range. No doubt about it. The gas mask, the respiratory protection issued to the troops, there's no way it can protect against inhalation. Well, that's what happened to myself and my team. We wore the respiratory protection during Gulf War I, inhaled it, and got sick. We wore the respiratory protection when we were doing the Depleted Uranium Project research at Nevada Test Site. U.S. Department of Energy approved respirators. And we could smell and taste the uranium through the filters.
During our time over there, we started seeing individuals become ill with various symptoms ranging from rashes all over their bodies or certain areas of their bodies to having chronic explosive diarrhea, which in some cases was heavy bleeding accompanied with that. We had, and I can speak for myself on this as well, excruciating headaches. The bones and the joints started aching, and there were night sweats, and you know, things only became worse as time progressed. And my unit in particular was deactivated after our return back to Germany in May of 1991. Some of the other individuals started showing up with other diseases, which included several types of cancers, and the neurological problems that many of us suffer from, and degenerative joint bone disease, spine disease, and other manifestations of illnesses that were at that time still unexplained, that caused them to no longer be able to perform their duties as a soldier as they had for so many years. And some of us that conceived children after the war And I know of at least 2 individuals where their children were born perfectly healthy according to the hospital, and within 6 months after their return, their hearts literally exploded in their chests.
In the civilian population in southern Iraq, the Iraqi doctors are reporting very large increases in cancer, leukemia, diabetes, immune system disorders, and of course birth defects in the newborns. The babies are born without a brain, without eyes, without legs, or without arms. Sometimes the baby is born with a cyclops eye, just one eye in the forehead. And each year, these birth defects are more and more severe. Pediatricians now in southern Iraq are reporting that some babies are born without heads or arms. They're just pieces of flesh. Because Iraq is in an arid region with severe dust storms annually, this remobilizes the depleted uranium on the ground and on the battlefields. And so the civilian population will continue to be exposed to increasing levels of DU internally. The severity of the birth defects and radiation-related diseases will increase over time. In fact, depleted uranium is a death sentence.
Individuals are depleted uranium casualties, whether they're civilians or combatants. Doesn't matter where they were, whether they were exposed during manufacturing processes, testing processes, or combat use. One of the things that we're starting to see, we saw the respiratory problems right off the bat. That was predicted by the Groves Memorandum, totally confirmed by my own physicians and totally documented in my VA medical records. Then we saw the rashes. Well, what we're having is we have the particulate irritation damage, we have the chemical toxicity damage, and then we have the radiological damage, which is the result of the cancers and the tumors. All of the birth defects, they absolutely confirm chromosomal aberrations from the ionizing radiation damage to the cells and the tissues. Neurological problems, rashes, cataracts, kidney problems. Your life is messed up. As said in the Groves Memorandum, it's going to cause all these health problems, and there is no medical care and treatment. You can't reverse radiation exposure damage to the body.
This represents a depleted uranium particle. The styrofoam ball in the center is millions of atoms of uranium, and the toothpicks are the tracks of the alpha particles that are released from the uranium nucleus. When these pass through the cell, they release tremendous amounts of energy, which cause the cell processes, enzymes, and hormones to malfunction. When there are billions of these distributed throughout a body, they cause diseases in many ways, and that's why Gulf War syndrome is a complex system of diseases caused by malfunctioning of all of the parts and the processes in a cell that make life possible.
Some of the soldiers were losing their mind.
Dennis Kine served in the U.S. Army until 2003 with the rank of Specialist D4. A graduate of the Nuclear, Biological, and Chemical School, today he serves as a veterans advocate. Kine also graduated magna cum laude from San Jose State University.
We bombed on January 17th. We started bombing. We bombed for 45 days. And after 45 days, February 28th, we started a ground invasion, which is said to be the most victorious military operation ever in the history of mankind. Well, it wasn't victorious. We got sick immediately. On March 1st, Lieutenant Colonel Ziem issued a memorandum that stated specifically, we better have somebody advocate for the use of this weaponry, otherwise the environmentalists might get upset. On March 3rd, they called a ceasefire. So from the date Lieutenant Colonel Ziem's memorandum was issued, 2 days later they called a ceasefire on March 3rd, 1991, and on March 8th another memorandum was issued saying all soldiers in this area should be protected by wearing their safety clothing. So in 1 week's time, they had 2 memorandums and a ceasefire that pretty much indicated why all the soldiers were sick.
If the American people could only wake up and see what is happening, you know, this is a tragedy. You know, we're not the first victims of war. In many cases, our wounds are invisible. You know, we carry them inside of us, and it's only through specialty testing and specialty diagnostic testing that you can isolate and find these particular mechanisms involved, whether they be chemical, biological, nuclear, or other agents that would cause what has become known as Gulf War illness, Gulf War syndrome, Persian Gulf illness. There's no such thing as a syndrome.